Thank you. I'd particularly like to ask the tile makers who've obviously got such a wealth of going around shows and things. How do you feel the general public attitude towards Celtic design has changed over the years, or has it changed? Is it the same? Is there as much enthusiasm, less enthusiasm, just generally?
We have two kind of experiences. We sell at a lot of Celtic festivals, and there is a ton of enthusiasm for Celtic work there. There's a lot of people that already maybe have family history or knowledge of Celtic work, so we definitely find enthusiasm there, and I think it's growing. In the general public, we meet a lot of people that aren't aware of Celtic artwork, and they'll approach it and ask about our abstract work. But they're always interested, and I think they're excited when they find out about it. So I enjoy having the chance to share that information with the general public.
Hello. Now, to Aidan Breen, you're obviously a man of enormous talent and a man of enormous patience as well to be able to carry out that work. I was wondering, when you carry out chasing or repousse work, do you have to visualize things in reverse? If you're pushing the metal or the silver out from the back, does that mean you have to visualize what it's going to look the right way around?
It does, but there's a trick for helping you to see what it's looking like. We use plasticine and we put it in to the back where we've knocked up, and then we turn it up and we see how it's looking. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
So it's kind of trial and error, but the plasticine, putting it in the back, is a great help, because it helps you with, you see the kind of depth you're getting, So does that answer the question?
It does. And is the sheet metal or the sheet silver, is it reusable if errors come about? If you end up making a gross error on a piece,
pardon?
Are you able to repousse it, if you like?
If there's an error?
Yes.
Well, wait till I tell you something. Us chasers, I worked in a job once and there was 6 of us in a shed, and our mantra was, we didn't make mistakes, they were features of the job.
Good man. Good man.
That's how we got out of it. Do you know what I mean? But most things, I say now to myself, if you put it in, you can get it out. Do you know what I mean? Most things you can fix some way or other. Actually, I had to fix something for somebody else. I was doing a medal for a guy, and didn't I spell it wrong? Oh, I couldn't believe it when he showed me. And he said, will you be able to get it? And I was. I poke it out, knock it out. So you can, if you have patience. Yeah.
I'd also just like to add to Steve O'Loughlin that it's the first image of a tree of life that I've actually ever admired. A tree of life is a pet hate of mine, the image of it, but your first image of that was extraordinary, and I really admired that.
Oh, thank you so much. And I encourage all of you to take on that theme, because it's such a great one and been interpreted in so many different ways. And like I said before, there was my take on it, using sort of some Aztec influence and color. But thank you. That's great to hear.
Hi, this question is for Brian and Katie. I know you mentioned that you hand draw your designs and then put them into the computer. When you do that, are you just scanning the design and you don't make any alterations like with a computer program, or do you sort of like finish that in the computer and then put it to the tile? How does that process work?
Most of the drawings are, for the most part, finished in the drawing stage, and then they're scanned and then just resized for the purpose of what we're going to be carving it on. At that point, sometimes they don't get as perfected because when we do the initial carving, we can add more detail or more shape to it as we transfer it.
A quick question for Aidan. Aidan, listening to you put me in mind of reading Stone Mad by Seamus Murphy, you know, and a world where so many people were doing great craft, you know, all across Ireland and specialising in different things. So 2 questions. One is, how many people, when you started, were doing what you do in Dublin? And the second part is about your tools. And I remember Seamus Murphy and the guys making their own chisels because, sure, what does a blacksmith know about carving stone, you know?
Well, first of all, I love that book, Seamus Murphy's book, Stone Mad. And actually, I met him in the National Gallery, or the National, the bloody, where you learn the art, what do you call it? Anyway, the art college, that's it. And he gave me a fucking lecture about, I was working in guilds, and he was kicking up stink. He said they're buying statues from Italy and everywhere, and they're rubbing it out and they're pretending they're made in Ireland. So that is my experience of Seamus, but a great book. But I'm a bit deaf, so did you ask how many chasers were in Dublin when I was starting?
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I started out in the trade, I started in one of the smallest firms, M.H. Gill & Son, and they had 6 silversmiths, they had a polisher, and then I went to Allwright and Marshall's, and they had about 8 silversmiths, a polisher, and they had a spinner. A spinner spins the stuff up on a chuck. And they had one chaser. Actually, the chaser was Scottish. All the chasers in Ireland at the turn of the century were Scottish. My master was Jock Marshall. He didn't speak very much to me, but he was very nice. He was the owner of Allwright and Marshall's, along with Johnny Allwright. The two of them, when West Weekly and Wheeler went back to England after the War of Independence, these 2 men took over. But so in the biggest firm was Gunnings, and Gunnings, like they had about 6 people packing the stuff. They had about 6 chasers working in the place. They would have had about 40 or 50 people. They worked on church work, and like their work is all over Australia, America, and what have you. So the trade now, there's no workshops now in Dublin. Allwright's closed a few years ago. They were the last. So we are like, I mean, I was going to say when I was starting out the conf that I am a living fossil. There's very few of us. There's very few. It's gone. It's virtually wiped out. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes I get sad. I think of all the people. Jesus, I met a guy who's a lot older than me, and I said, "How is Eamon Aspel?" Dead. How is Joe Doyle? Dead. My God, everyone was bloody dead. Do you know what I mean? So maybe that's a long-winded answer. I hope I answered it. Did I?
Well, aye, and the second bit was, do you ever make your own tools?
Oh yeah, we make all our own tools. We make all our own tools out of silver steel. They're about 3 inches long, and that was the first thing I got to do when I started my apprenticeship. Was I was asked to make a few tools, and the first job I ever done as a chaser was, there's a tassel hanging out of a sanctuary lamp. This was in Gills, and I had to do the lines. I had to pretend it was I got a lump of brass and I had to make it into a tassel, and I had to make the punches for that. And yeah, we make our own punches, and sometimes I fall in love with these punches, and then I can't find the bloody thing. And there was recently I had to make it again, and then didn't I find it? Do you know what I mean? So there you are.
Brilliant, thank you.
Hi, this is a question for Steve. I was wondering, how do you approach your religious work versus your just more general work differently?
That's a good question, and it's there was always some spirituality was taking place in my work, and again, taking that from the Celtic art that goes on there, and one of the things that attracted me to the Celtic art, and what the symbols mean to me, like you see the spirals and the knotwork and the key patterns, and they're really for me they symbolize the cycles of life and the turning of the seasons and the grand patterns that take place in the universe. And so when I when I take a figure and I interlace them together, and I feel that it's conforming to those great patterns in life, right? And those great grand rhythms that we all live by. And so starting there and then coming into starting to do some liturgical work, and I grew up Catholic and all that, and I fell all away from that, but it certainly instilled with me a really deep spiritual spark. It isn't the same experience that my brothers and sisters had in Catholic schools where they were wrapped on their fingers and tortured by the nuns. But for me, I took away the little guardian angel thing. And so often you find ways to personify your own spirituality. And when I'm planning to do, like you saw the inside of the altarpiece there, and I'm currently working, when I come back from here, I'm going to be working on something for the entrance of the church, which I'm really excited about because the doors open into the triptych, and then I'm going to have that doors open, and then the participant enters right in. It's the old enter the church thing. But it's true that I just have gotten a real comfort with Christianity again. And I have any dogma or anything, I just feel that sometimes I'm just being used as a little tool, and I just stay with that and let it flow through me. And so it's nice to have it kind of come full circle for me.
Hi again. I actually have a question for Ed. Ed, do you find as technology evolves and obviously computer designing programs get better, do you find a group of younger folks who are interested in trying to learn what you do with this ancient, beautiful art and then using the advancements in technology? Do you teach classes on this? Do you have like a group of students who want to kind of learn this type of art? How does that work for you?
I really don't have that much access to many young people. Stephen actually hired me for a day to teach his apprentices how to use the programming for his use, for what he was needing to do. It would be actually, you people here are the most interested in how I do things more than anybody else. I don't run into that many other people, younger people, that would be interested. At least I haven't yet. And aside from the odd case where actually Jeff Fitzpatrick Adams here, his wife, was supposed to come, and she actually was asking me questions about how I do things. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it, so I thought I was going to give a little tutorial to her about how to do these things. But no, I haven't run into anything where I'd be teaching it yet.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess just to expand on that point, and maybe I know Stephen mentioned this in his piece, that there's maybe various opinions about the validity of digital art as it relates to Celtic artwork, and all of you up there, I think, have varying degrees of separation from quote unquote traditional Celtic art, right? And different experiences with the general public, and then also the people in our community. So could any of you, or all of you, or Ed, or any of you just talk about your experiences with that, and how what the temperature of that is currently for us in the community?
Well, I'll start. When I do exhibit around locally in my town or at conventions and such, people are certainly interested. They're certainly fascinated by the look of these things, much like Stephen started out seeing, the Cairo page from the Book of Kells. It's just, it's astounding. So they get interested and start asking the questions about it. I have yet to have anybody ask me to actually, pursue it themselves. How about?
Well, when I exhibit, and I think I talked about how I get that question of what does all these interlaced figures mean, and then it goes into, I talk about Celtic art and where it came from, and many times you're right, people don't have any idea where it came from, but it also is great. It's a great visual hook that gets people hooked in, and it catches their eye, and they become interested in it. And I even find that I'm, and I guess because the Latino color, where there's a really diverse audience, they'll come and see my work and they just love it. They fall in love with it, and they seem to understand the rhythms, the linear abstraction, and it just seems to speak to them that way. And so I oftentimes, though they're not aware of that particular art tradition, they sense it and they understand it innately. What's the
utilizing any techniques, modern techniques, old
Any modern?
techniques?
Hello. I'm a bit deaf. That's a kind of an exaggeration. I'm nearly totally deaf, to tell you the truth, so I didn't hear the question. But are there any new? There are new techniques in the precious metal business, but I don't use any of them. I try to download my PowerPoint talk. Myself and Mary spent about an hour trying to do it, and in the end I had to go down to the computer shop and get the guy to do it, and he done it in about 2 minutes. So I'm not really into the new stuff, but it is there, CAD CAM and all this, like it's extraordinary. To tell you the truth, us chasers, we used to be annoyed that anything could replicate what we were doing. We were like Luddites, to tell you the truth. So us chasers wouldn't be in favour of new technology that would put us out. We just saw, is this going to put us out of business or out of work? Do you know what I mean? So that's my answer.
I guess for the question, we've had a few debates and juries for art fairs where we've had some people say, oh, Celtic work, you're just copying from somebody, that's not valid. With other jurors going, well, if you read the artist statements and the photos of the process, they're learning more in depth, which have gotten us into the shows.
We do use computers a little bit with what we do. We take our drawings and translate them into a workable map to make the carving from. It's not a huge part of what we do. We have a choice in how much we refine the work, and I always like to leave a little bit of the hand, evident in the finished piece, because I feel like that's an important part of it to me, for what we do.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
I have a question for Ed. So I noticed, well, first my thought was, gosh, if Ed Frith, the Lindisfarne Gospels or the illuminator of the Book of Kells had been able to have access to the technology that you're using, they would have been, I think they would have ran with it. And I'm fascinated with symmetry in early medieval art in Britain and Ireland, and I noticed that there was a lot of rotation, multiplying smaller forms within the composition and rotating them, and using, I know in an early medieval sense, sorry, this is long-winded as I'm trying to think my question out loud. using symmetry as a sort of generative tool, or just when you're winding up with a composition at the end, for other reasons there's symmetrical relationships. Does the method that you're using sort of open up your way of seeing or creating using symmetry, and does it let you push symmetrical relationships even farther? Because I feel like, yeah.
That's a good question. I actually studied a lot of M.C. Escher. It was mentioned, and he did what are eventually called tessellations. He called them the regular division of a plane, where you take an image and it superimposes itself amongst itself, so that there is no such thing as background anymore. It is all self-contained within it. Frequently he used reptiles, lizards, or something like that. I tend that way to begin with. He studied the tiles in the Alhambra in Spain. I was fortunate enough about 9 years ago to go visit there myself and took a look at what he was studying. And I can sense that a lot of the motifs in Celtic art lend themselves directly to that kind of tiling. And I frequently will draw something that really can have no end. It's hard to actually make an end to it, because it should tile on forever. So yeah, it lends itself to being able to replicate it and move it over so that you can match it up and get the edges so that they're all nice and tucked together and such, much like puzzles put together. I actually love doing that, but it gets kind of boring too to most other people, because they're used to seeing, some big grand story being told about a riot or something. It lends itself to like wallpaper more than anything else, and I don't really think there's that much Celtic wallpaper out there just yet.